All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating thought experiment. This is part of a larger, ongoing investigation where we're taking a pretty bold hypothesis and putting it through a serious stress test. So here's the big idea we're playing with. The central question for today's analysis. What if the powerful figure of Dhul Qarnayn, with his incredible journeys and epic constructions, isn't a person at all? What if he's a metaphor for time itself? Okay, so what we're going to do is really put this idea to the test. We're going to try to map this time model directly onto the Quranic story. We'll see if it holds up, if the pieces fit together, or if it all just falls apart under pressure. Let's get started. All right, so first up, let's look at the wins. Where does this model just click? The parts where it fits almost perfectly, without us having to stretch things too much. So the story kicks off with Dhul Qarnayn getting this incredible power, right? He's given the means to do pretty much anything. And in our time model, well, this fits like a glove. I mean, think about it. What is time if not the ultimate power, the ultimate means? It's the one thing that makes everything else possible, the very foundation of cause and effect. And right there, you can see why this idea is so compelling at first. The coherence here is super strong. It just feels right. The concept of time as the ultimate enabler lines up so naturally with the text. Okay, moving on. The narrative then talks about Dhul Qarnayn following a way, right? He travels to the farthest east and the farthest west, the rising and setting of the sun. Now, in our model, this isn't a physical trip. It's a metaphor for the unstoppable forward march of time itself, that constant chain of cause and effect. And reaching the ends of the earth? That becomes about reaching the very limits of what we can perceive, or maybe the boundaries of a whole civilization. See, when it comes to these big, abstract ideas, like movement, causality, cosmic scale, the model is still holding up really, really well. It handles this part of the story beautifully. But now we start to apply some real pressure. This is where we look for the breaking points, the moments where the model starts to show some cracks. And boom, here's our first big problem. The text says Dhul Qarnayn confronts a group of people and has to make a moral choice. Does he punish them or show them mercy? Now, how does that work if Dhul Qarnayn is time? Time is impersonal. It's just a mechanism. It doesn't make choices. It doesn't have morals. It just happens. And this is what the source itself calls a clear breaking point. To make the model fit here, you have to twist a personal moral decision into some kind of impersonal law of consequences. The amount of mental gymnastics you have to do, the interpretive cost, is suddenly very, very high. But things get even tougher. The model's biggest test, its absolute maximum challenge, comes when we get to the building of the Great Wall, the rampart. The text is super clear. It's a physical project, using real materials like iron and copper. For our time model to have any chance here, we have to turn all of that into a giant metaphor. The engineering becomes a reorganization of a system, and the raw materials, they become abstract states. The interpretive cost here is just through the roof. Yeah, as you can probably guess, the coherence here just plummets. It's rated as very weak. This is the point where the model is strained to its absolute limit. I mean, it's practically snapping. Okay, so we've run the stress test, we've seen the highs and the lows. What's the final verdict? How did our hypothesis do overall? Well, this source gives it a final score, a rough one, for its overall consistency, and it comes in at around 60%. So not a total failure, not at all, but definitely not a perfect fit either. And this table here gives us a really clear breakdown of the good and the bad. You can see the model is fantastic when it's dealing with big, abstract ideas. Movement, causality, cosmic scale. But where does it fall apart? With the concrete human stuff, moral choices, actual conversations, and physical engineering. So at the end of the day, what does that 60% really tell us? It tells us that this model is a really powerful tool for thinking, a philosophical lens. It gives us a fascinating new angle to reflect on the story. But it's just not enough to explain the whole thing, top to bottom. But remember what we said at the start. This is an ongoing investigation. And this test, it's not actually over. In fact, you could say the most important part of the analysis hasn't even happened yet. Everything we've just gone through, all of that was just setting the stage. The final fate of this entire time model, whether it stands or falls for good, depends on the one massive piece of the puzzle we haven't even touched. And that brings us to the ultimate question. the one that will drive the next part of this investigation. Can this model possibly survive its final, greatest challenge? Can it give us a coherent explanation for the chaotic, destructive force of Gog and Magog, the very reason the wall was built in the first place? Well, that's the test we're going to tackle next time.